got me like, pussy got me like, money got me like, money got me like, money got me like, pussy got me like, if I don't get what I dream, I'ma pass on.
Yo, how are you? Appreciate y'all tuning in to episode 9 of the Why Not podcast. On this week's episode, we have sex therapist Angela Skurtu. Angela Skurtu is a sex therapist based here out of St. Louis, Missouri, who specializes in dealing with communication issues, infidelity in relationships, and how to overcome those types of obstacles, and really being able to open up and work through the issues in your relationship or your marriage or your sex life or your sexual relationship in your marriage. I guess some of those things could always end up fucking correlating, but whatever. All right. But yeah, Angela was definitely gracious enough to take the time out of her busy schedule, speaking at national conferences and writing books and running her own podcast called the About Sex Podcast with Angela Skurtu, available on every single platform available. So, but yeah, Angela and I sat down and talked for about right about an hour or so, just kind of dealing with some of the things she sees in the everyday life of a sex therapist, and kind of go over some questions that you may or may not have had regarding what a sex therapist does and how she affects people's lives. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm fucking, when you just wake up, and I know I've said this before, you haven't said real words to anybody, you're still trying to find your voice, and yeah, that's where I'm at. It's okay though. We'll get through this together. And speaking of getting through this together, I appreciate every single last one of you who has stayed tuned in every single week. As I said in last week's episode, we just keep growing and growing. So make sure to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. And if you have anybody that you think would be interesting, or you might have something interesting you think you need to share yourself, go ahead and contact me. JustinBricker22@gmail.com, Justin Scott Bricker on all social media, or at Stacking Bricks. But I would love if you made sure you went to the iTunes store, YouTube, wherever you're listening to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and leave a 5-star comment. All it does is help the podcast. And yeah, that's about it. As always, I don't want to keep you too long. Here is episode 9, sex therapy.
Money got me like, pussy got me like, money got me like.
Starting live.
What are we on here? On Facebook? We on
Yep, this is on Facebook.
Gotcha.
I always live stream from my business. Hi, everybody. I am being interviewed for Why Not podcast.
Why Not podcast. I'm Justin Bricker. Appreciate y'all tuning in.
All right.
Well, Angela, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. I know we've had some scheduling conflicts this week.
We're fine.
It's all right. So, like I said, I appreciate you kind of squeezing me in here on Friday morning. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm all right. Turns out my daughter didn't actually have school today. They had professional development day.
Oh.
So I got to spend the morning with her for a little bit before I dropped her off with her mom to come back here.
Oh, well, good. Sounds fun.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you love it when they do those professional development days?
I don't understand it.
It's so that they learn things and grow as teachers. We want them to have some education, essentially.
Right, I guess. That's too funny.
Right.
So why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, so I'm a marriage and sex therapist, actually, and I've been doing it forever, really. But forever is a decade, essentially. So
Right.
I've been doing marriage and family therapy for 11 years, and then I've been in business here at St. Louis Marriage Therapy for 8 years.
Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So what does a typical day look like for you?
Oh, it's all over the place. Well, it might start with a podcast like this. But then in addition, here, hold on, this is messing around. In addition, it might include like seeing clients all day. And then beyond that, I could be doing a networking thing. I could be speaking somewhere. I could be contributing to an article. I contribute to articles all across the country, like Huffington Post or...
Really?
Yeah. And I can get called to speak at places across the country too.
And what kind of speeches do you typically give? I guess it obviously ranges from a different sort of things. What would you say your exact specialty is, or do you have one?
Well, sex therapy is the specialty, but then I have 2 books too. So one of my books is Helping Couples Overcome Infidelity, a therapist manual. And so like a big topic I speak about is infidelity. And then the other book I have is Premarital Counseling, a guide for clinicians. And so I don't speak as much about premarital counseling, but I'll do a lot of premarital counseling for couples, which is interesting. I think that prevention would be a great idea. But
prevention of marriage in general?
Well, no, prevention of some of the problems that you'll face in marriage.
Gotcha.
Not preventing marriage. I'm a marriage therapist. I'm totally okay with it.
Hey, I understand that.
It's like we do need to prevent some people from getting
Some
married,
people,
perhaps.
definitely.
No,
Absolutely.
I'm just kidding. No, that's not fair.
So how would you even go about overcoming, infidelity in a relationship? Obviously, that's, one of the biggest hurdles that you'll ever tackle. And that's something that the biggest hurdle that I've ever had to tackle in a relationship, dealing with it. I don't think it's something that I could ever come back from, but I'm sure that's a typical answer you receive, right?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, to be honest, more couples do work through it than not. That doesn't mean there aren't couples that do break up as a result of it, but a lot of couples come in here and work through it. It's not something that you get over. I like to phrase it as more, it's something you work through. It takes a lot of time. The average is around 1 to 3 years of how long it really takes to work through it. Now, it's not as chaotic in the in the initial 3 months. It's very like up and down, high highs, low lows. It's like being on a roller coaster.
Absolutely.
But after that, it starts to get better. And what I always say is, you don't have to make a decision to stay for it could be a year before you make the decision to stay or not stay. Because that's another thing. People are like, how can I make it through this? I don't know if I could get over this or work through the trust. And so I have people work with me without having to make that decision. Let's just see what work we can get done, and if you guys can improve, whether or not you stay.
Do you feel the people that tend to work through it more are the people that have kids in a relationship?
The interesting is it runs across the gamut. Like some people work through it because they have kids. Children does make it harder because you have a family. It's not You're not just letting go of each other, but you're letting go of all the ways that you've put your relationship together, all the friends that you share. But I've even had couples at the very beginning work through it. It's hard when somebody cheats actually right after getting married or right after having a first kid, for example, but that's pretty common too.
Right.
And they'll still work through it. The weird thing is that for those couples who do work through it, it gets them being very honest and open in ways they never were in their relationship. And it creates a form of erotic healing where they have really hot sex as a result. No, it's true.
I bet, because at that point, you have nothing left but transparency to save your relationship, right? Mm-hmm. So, you get to everything that's made you unhappy, what's led you there, and a lot of times, chances are, it probably is something that happens in the bedroom, right?
Some of it is, sometimes not. But yeah, and I think it's also like going through an affair is like facing death to some degree. And anytime you face death, it makes you want to live life to the fullest. So a lot of people describe it to me as like, well, when you got nothing to lose. So they get deeply honest, very raw. And that translates into kind of falling in love again in the bedroom, which if you think about the beginning of a relationship, I mean, that is how people fall in love.
Yeah,
they get very honest, they put their feelers out, they get vulnerable with each other, but when they can be deep and accepting through that process, then they fall in love. So it oddly is an awakening for some couples. Not all couples, obviously the ones that break up.
Right.
It's not an awakening, it's a let's shut this down.
Well, I guess it's a different kind of awakening. It's say, hey, this is not
this
is not what I need to have, for the rest of my life, or for the time being.
It's not what I want for myself, which absolutely that's the case too. Like sometimes it's an awakening that I haven't been happy in this relationship for a really long time, and this is just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
Right. People get stuck in a relationship because, they develop these feelings for this person, and then not only them, but their families and all the other relationships that they've created, and then they feel like they don't have a way out.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I could see that too. Like, there are people who kind of feel trapped and are stuck, and that kind of stinks, actually. In those cases, what I'm doing is I'm trying to help them either develop stronger self-esteem so that they can go, or more community connections or friendship connections outside of the relationship. And that's another reason why I work with either, like, you don't have to decide whether to stay or go. Either way, we need to become a stronger person. And so if developing those things makes you strong enough to leave, then by all means, then you leave if that's the right decision for you. The hard thing is that, so like, we live here, I don't know where your listeners are coming from, but we live in Missouri. And Missouri is a place that is very, very religious at times. And there's very much, with that religious belief set, there's very much a, like, marriage till you die. Like, you must stay committed. And as a therapist, I take the approach of marriage is valuable, and I do want to help people work on their marriages, but I think that mental health can trump a marriage. And if people are in a situation where they're really harmful, like in a harmful situation emotionally, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to end a marriage if it is deeply harming your emotional stability and safety. But that perspective, for some people who come to me who are on that religious side of things, it can be a struggle.
Right, because I mean, how can you have any functional relationships in your life if you don't have mental stability for yourself, and to be able to wake up and process what you need to do and actually be able to do it for that day, Exactly.
And I do want marriages to be healthy, but what if the marriage is the thing that's, like, you're in an emotionally abusive marriage and every day you're just fighting to survive, or physically abusive, or, it's hard to say this because a lot of people cheat on each other, but, like, lying to each other chronically is a form of emotional abuse, and because it makes you feel crazy, essentially, like, is what's real. It makes people question reality constantly. And so if you are in a situation where you're just constantly being lied to, then it is a form of emotional abuse. And it's okay if some people need to leave that, and it's okay if some people want to work through that.
Right.
So it's the hard conundrum I'm always in.
Absolutely. So, obviously, like you said, you have a wide range of clients. You usually see more couples, or one-on-one, or a mixture of both.
Mixture of both.
Mm-hmm. And what? So what? How did you get into this? What?
Okay.
You all right there?
I had to scratch.
It's okay.
I hope you're editing some of this.
Nope, it's all going.
Okay.
Unfiltered.
All right. I just had an itchy ear, so I was like, oh no, I gotta do this, and then the whole thing fell off. This one's not getting edited.
No, everybody just saw that.
Hey, everybody. All right, continue.
That's too funny. So, how did you come about? What sparked this journey for you?
Oh, well, so I personally came from a very religious, conservative background. I don't want to go into the which one because, I work with everybody, all values, all religions. But
are you from Missouri?
I am definitely from Missouri. Lots of preachers in the family.
Where'd you go to high school?
Pattonville High School.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was one that stayed the entire time. I didn't move around. That's typical Missouri thing. Is actually you never go anywhere, and you can't leave your own neighborhood either.
Yeah.
But I've grown actually now. I'm in Maplewood. I'm so excited.
15 miles. I'm proud of you.
I moved closer to the city. I'm not quite in the city because that would be too scary.
Yeah. You got to walk your cart now.
Yeah. Well, so anyhow, I got into this field because I had very religious, very conservative background, and within that group, I kept seeing problems in. I don't know exactly what population I want to say, but females were struggling. And then people who were in the LGBTQIA plus population.
Struggling how?
Well, so for females, we were taught, stay virgins until marriage, and you'll be blessed in some way, and this is valuable. And there is value for people who want to do that, don't get me wrong. But what was happening for the women in my life, my friends, because I was still the person who people would go to talk to, so I also had that natural, I'm a listener, caretaker sort of deal. But they would get married early, very young, because they're sexual people and they want to have sex. That's what people do, right?
Crazy, right?
I know, it's a wild concept, but anyhow, they'd get married young and early, and I don't think they always were thoughtful of who they were getting married to, even though they would say, like, God told me to do this or whatever, it's like you're young and you're in 20s. Are you sure you know who you want to marry in your 20s? Like
right,
early 20s,
it's
19?
It's like those guys that enlist in the military and then 3 days later they're married and divorced within a year.
Yeah, to each their own. I mean, we all live our life. You do you, right? But
right.
But no, so what I would see happen is they'd get married young and early, and then about a year in, they would talk to me and say, I don't really like my sex life. I'm kind of just doing it for him right now, but I'm not getting anything out of this. And I was like, oh, really? And like one by one, they were dropping off like flies like that, saying the same thing to me. And, my family, while we are religious, we're also very sexual by nature and very open, and we have no boundaries. It's partly because I have a mom that's deaf, so she doesn't know where boundaries are. And what's funny, it's the women who have no boundaries. The men are very, they're the conservative ones.
To show respect in front of the women. And
no, I just think because they're religious and that's what they were taught, but it's just funny. So no, we have no boundaries. So we talked a lot about sex and we were really open on the female side about that stuff. But so anyhow, because of that, I had a very positive look on sex. I didn't see sex as a bad thing. Yeah, I had some of that religious stuff kind of in the back of my head, but it's like, no, this is supposed to be great. You're supposed to enjoy yourself. I did have a grandpa who would say, the marriage bed is undefiled. Meaning, do whatever you want in there. That'll be great. And he was a preacher. He was a hilarious guy.
Oh, my gosh.
So, there was a lot of sex positivity, at least, in the family, And when I saw that happening with my girlfriends, I was like, there's something seriously wrong, because this is supposed to be a space where you get to enjoy yourself. And then, additionally, I would see it in the LGBTQ community when people were coming out. Essentially, they were either shamed or they were so scared to come out because, it was kind of a life or death situation. Not that somebody might physically murder them, but, in that sense of, you're going to hell. If I come out and, be the person who I am naturally, I'm evil in some way, or I'm something to be ashamed of, essentially. And so, I've always been a very compassionate person, and while I understood some of the religious values behind why people were doing that, I just love people. I love people at a very base level. And so for anybody to have that deep of a conflict was painful to me to watch and to be a part of.
Especially somebody you know and care about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it was little pieces, little things like that really drew me to the sex therapy field. And then there was this old lady, I don't know if you guys ever watched, it was Talk Sex with
Dr. Ruth?
No, it wasn't Dr. Ruth. It was Sue Johnson. Talk Sex with Sue Johnson. It was this old lady with a weird accent that would play with sex toys on the air and give it burkettes for this is 3 burkettes of hotness. She would have tried them and then really, rating
really
them.
Right?
Huh?
Was she really, really wrinkly and old?
Yeah, she was. But she was like your grandma, and she's answering questions about sex, and she was just such a cute lady. And I was like, I could totally see myself doing that into my 70s.
I remember staying up really late when I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And I had an older brother who passed away when I was 12, but he was 6 years older than me. And we would watch that and just feel like we were doing something so bad,
Oh, wow. I don't think it was bad at all, How else are you going to learn?
Right.
That's the sad thing, is most people just learn through porn, and it wasn't initially used for educational purposes.
No.
It really is just to get you off, I promise.
And sell you products, because now they're running ads.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Although, did you know that Pornhub is now offering sex education videos because they realize so many people are coming to them as a form of sex education that they're like, we really need to put something real out there so that people can learn. So if you do want to get some Pornhub sex education, go to their sex education section.
I guess they're the number one in the game right now. I would imagine they got some good references to use.
They do. They're using sex therapists to talk through some things, so they're not pornographic videos. They're like people like me just saying, this is what you need to know about your clitoris. Which you all need to know a lot, by the way. Everybody, learn more about your clitoris.
It's a lost treasure, apparently.
It can easily be found and used to your advantage.
That's too funny.
So anyhow,
yeah. So what was it? Sue Johnson, right?
Uh-huh.
So
basically, the storyline is those kind of 3 things intersected, and then I just decided to go to school for it. I started, it's a funny story on this. So in my sophomore year of college, I took one psychology class, and I was like,
Where'd you go to college?
I went all over. So I first went to Drake University for my freshman year to be actually an opera major.
So you gonna sing me a few
I
notes?
mean, I don't know if I want to sing, but I do actually have a pretty awesome voice, but not to like brag, but like I'm kind of in training for years.
Just the acoustics in here aren't right
They're just not right now, and I
no.
wasn't coming in here to sing, but no, I do. I was a decent singer. Still am, but now I just do it for fun. But like I was like, I'm gonna do this, and then I was like, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna make money off of this. I want to do something else. I liked doing it as a hobby, but I didn't want to really do it as a professional career. So I went to Drake, and then I came back here for a year to St. Charles Community, where I took this psychology class. And I remember taking this class and saying, yeah, this is awesome. I love this stuff, but it would take too long to get a degree, so I'm not doing this. So I completely veered away. Then I went to Hawaii, Leeward Community College, for 2 years there, and the last 2 years, University of Hawaii. And it was around that time in University of Hawaii that I finally went back to psychology and was like, why did I abandon this? I love this.
Been done by now.
I could have been, yeah, it ended up being 6 years of undergrad, but whatever. I did what I did. You know, you make your mistakes and you live through them. But so at University of Hawaii is when I started to finish that, essentially the psychology degree. And then I went on to Oregon, University of Oregon in Eugene, to get my master's in marriage and family therapy. And then in addition, I grabbed this, I always knew I wanted to be a sex therapist. So I did marriage and family therapy because you have to have some mental health degree. And I figured, well, you know, usually it's 2 or more people having sex, so I should know about that situation. Right. And then I went and got my certification as a sex therapist.
And you went from Hawaii to Oregon, and how the hell are you back here?
Oh, well, you know, family. They say that St. Louis is like flypaper or something. You know, you fly away, but you come right back or something. So it was, you know, I have a daughter. She's 4 years old. When my now ex, I mean, we were together, but not anymore. That's fine. But when we were together, we wanted to come back here, and you know, we wanted to be around family, and that was a good choice because you do need a lot of resources when you're having a kid.
Absolutely.
And we still do, actually. You know, my sisters will help out, and I have family and friends too. So it's just being around the supports. Although I will say I do miss it. Hawaii was beautiful and sunny, and Oregon was awesome too.
It would have took me a lot longer than 6 years to graduate college if I was in Hawaii.
Well, see, I was only in Hawaii in 4 years because the 2 extra years were Drake and here,
Right.
remember? But yeah, actually studying in Hawaii was really easy and nice. Like what I would do is I'd take my books to the beach and I would study for a little bit, but then take a break, go swim, come back, study. And there's research to support that style, by the way, because, you know, it's called chunking. You take breaks, but that helps you keep more of the information. So, I mean, I was just justifying it because I wanted to swim, but apparently what I was doing was like the best way to study.
Motivation. You were earning that swim.
Mm-hmm. I did. It was like, yeah, go swim, come back, go swim. But, oh, God, I do miss being around the beach. Like if I had my end game is eventually have like a vacation home, but that's a work home like in Costa Rica or Mexico, and have people come for couples intensives, like a little bed and breakfast. Yeah. So I'm still doing my job. Yeah. But then I'm on the beach and relaxing.
Yeah, they're just fun in the extra week that you get to stay there for vacation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people do that, you know, where you kind of like revitalize your relationship. So yeah, it'd be a really fun
retreat or
exactly.
Have you done one of those before?
Yep, I have.
So what does something like that look like?
Well,
I guess they're probably all different, but
well, I mean, they can all be different, but like the most common one I do is called the Sex, Wine, and Chocolate Seminar, and I get people a little liquored up, and I give them chocolate, and then we talk about the sex and like ways they can improve and spice up their relationship. And usually, you know, my joke is, I will get you laid tonight, I promise, you know, but like. It often does because it's getting people talking about stuff and normalizing it. I do a lot of work with normalizing sex for women because women have really, not just religiously, but culturally been shut down sexually. A lot of women struggle to have permission to be sexual people because there's this kind of, we call it the Madonna whore complex, but basically women can either be all pure or they're all sexual and demonized in some ways in our culture. So there's not a lot of representation for right in between where you can be like an educated woman that's sexy, or you can be, I don't know, I guess you can be a sexy librarian, but even that, it's
right.
There's just a kind of
there's a porno stigma on that one.
There's stigma around it, you know. So it's like I feel like women don't often have freedom to just be their natural sexual selves and not feel like there's something wrong with them. And the easiest way to put that out there is thinking of the question they ask when somebody gets raped is, what are you wearing? Like, So no matter what we wear, we could potentially be blamed for something that we didn't do anything, where we didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And it's just an example of like, yeah, like, well, if you were sexualized in any sort of way, then it was your own fault for what happened
you
here.
should have known. You invited that to happen.
Exactly. Which, how is that fair at all? Like,
right.
it's just a cultural representation of that sense of like why women struggle to be sexual people without feeling like they're sluts or whores.
Right, because if I get raped, nobody's gonna ask me what I was wearing.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would ask you that.
No.
When would they question whether or not that happened or not, or like?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's something like I truly fear. Growing up, having a daughter. She's 7 years old, and her mom and I aren't together, but we, I pride myself on the level of co-parenting that we do. And so she's in jiu-jitsu. She's active in all sports. I make sure that she knows that, no matter what, you are no different than anybody else. People are all the same.
Okay.
But especially because I especially want her in jiu-jitsu because of, like you said, you can get taken advantage of, and people that does trigger some people. There are sick people out there who will rape you because of what you are wearing, whether or not you want to, just because you want to look nice, you know?
Yeah. That's hard stuff. I'm glad you're getting her into self-defense stuff. That's always good.
Oh, she's a beast too. She loves it. She likes to hurt people.
Well, beyond that though, I think something that's a preventative factor is just having education around sex, so that I don't know how far we want to get into this topic because it's a tough topic, but for a person to be able to be taught how to say no, and to to be able to even identify like what's theirs and what's okay to for example, I was thinking of like little kids. My sister Pam, she's a teacher. She's a preschool teacher. And one of the things that they're doing this class where they're just teaching them about their body parts and what's okay, like when is it okay for somebody to touch you and when is it not okay? Like, for example, usually a doctor examining you with your parent there is fine, but like when should you actually be saying, no, this isn't okay, and walking away or getting out of a situation? Kids are actually very vulnerable and they don't know all that information, and most rape isn't happening by strangers. It happens by close people, friends or family, that just take advantage of a situation, essentially. And so if it's a friend or a family member, it's hard for you to know, but this is my family member, so is this okay? Is this not okay? What is okay? And how do I, if thinking of a 7-year-old or even a 4-year-old, what's a boundary? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so one of the greatest preventive factors is just educating your kids all the way through their lifetime on what's okay and what's not okay, and just about their bodies and safety and how to set boundaries and how to get out of situations that are uncomfortable, not just through fighting, but just knowing when something might be an uncomfortable or inappropriate situation.
Right, being able to feel it before it comes on.
Yeah.
Do you do any work with children?
I don't. So I work with 18 and over. Every now and then, if I've been working with a couple and they ask, hey, would you be open to talking to our teenager, I might do it here and there, but I really don't prefer to work with the younger generations, but not because they're not awesome. It's actually because I struggle with parents. Parents often are very blaming of their kids when they come into therapy. Not always, but a lot of times. And that's a personal thing that's just difficult for me to deal with.
Blaming as in how?
Well, so I take your typical ADHD kid, okay? There's a lot of that going around, and he might, so ADHD comes with that hyperactivity. It can sometimes come with just distraction. And okay, so yes, that kid may have ADHD, but there are things that parents can do to help and to contribute to skill building with that child. But if they come in kind of blaming that kid, oh, he's got ADHD and there's all these issues and I just can't, there's this way that sometimes parents are very blaming and shaming of their kids and not willing to take any ownership for the parts that they could play to help out in the situation. And that was always a very difficult thing for me. So I personally just don't often do child or adolescent work for that reason. Even adolescents, I remember I had this kid once. Oh, sorry, Mike. But I had this kid once that so first of all, sex and kids it's just an interesting thing to explore because they're vulnerable. So everybody's really freaked out at times about
it's almost more taboo than talking about sex in the adult world.
It can be. Yeah. It can be. And so there was this So first of all, at the age of like 6 or 7-ish, is a common time for kids to do the "you show me mine, I'll show me yours" game. And they don't always call that, but it's just a time where they're curious about like what do genitals look like. I have a penis, you have a vagina, let's see what this looks like, right? So there's nothing weird about that, but it's something that scares parents. And so there was this parent that really freaked out about it and like said to her son, "You can't be trusted because he showed, he was his penis."
Yeah.
Like I want to like did the game that every kid does, but because she has her own issue. Oops, sorry. Here,
Okay.
let me turn this off. I forgot to actually turn the noise off from it. But anyhow, so like essentially this sense of being scared. The mom was scared of her own sexual interaction around she probably had her own history too, but because this thing that is normal happened, she didn't feel safe with her son being around her daughter anymore. And like that's a really exaggerated thing, and it's hard to talk to a parent about, like, when they're blaming a kid like that for something sexual that's normal. It was just too hard for me sometimes to get in there. And I mean, not that I wouldn't try, but I don't know. Parents have a way of blaming their kids for things they really shouldn't.
Right. Well, and it's almost impossible to tell a parent how to raise their kid anyways, whether you're a professional or not.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to hear, well, you should have done this. Well, I did everything I could right.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that'd probably be a giant issue you run into.
It can be. And like, it's not that it can't be done. There's actually therapists who do a wonderful job of connecting with parents. And that really is the best way to do child work, is they'll be spending a lot of time trying to connect and understand the parent and work with that person. And when they're able to do that, that seems to work a little bit better than if they are, if they're just saying this is something wrong with you. All right, I'm going to turn this off real quick, guys. Turn that off. I'm sorry. I was supposed to put this on Do Not Disturb. But
I'm a professional at doing that.
Yeah, of Do Not Disturb?
No, of not putting it on Do Not Disturb. That's what I made sure to do it like 4 minutes in.
Well, can I do this real quick so everybody's got
good.
it? Do Not Disturb. Sorry for everybody watching.
we'll take this time to plug your podcast real quick.
All right, cool.
All right. It's the About Sex podcast, correct?
Yeah, that's the About Sex podcast. And so www.aboutsexpodcast, and of course for anybody else listening, I have my website, www.therapistinstlouis.com.
Nice. All right,
Okay.
Cool. All right. And I want to touch back on something that you talked about earlier. You wrote a book on getting over infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I've noticed is, well, and I guess everybody's noticed, but the way social media has affected relationships. Do you see a lot of problems that deal with that on a day-to-day basis? Just, the instant ability to go out and reach out to somebody when things aren't right in the home life, and you can get that constant validation from somewhere else when you aren't getting it at home.
So are you saying what impact has social media had on infidelity?
How much of it have you seen?
I mean, how much I've seen is a lot. I mean, there's so much going on with people when it comes to infidelity. So first of all, it's a 60 to 80% rate of people who've cheated to some degree in their lives, whether that be emotional affairs, whether it be like...
What is an emotional affair?
Well, so an emotional affair might be getting really deeply close with someone in a way that your partner would feel uncomfortable with. Like, however you... when people define a monogamous relationship, the most common definition is like we're sharing our thoughts and feelings, and we're supposed to have certain things, even emotionally, that we share that are really just between us, but sexually between us too. But it's funny when I even try to put out a definition for a monogamous relationship, they're often not very similar when you actually ask a couple, how do you define this and what's okay or what's not okay? So to kind of go further into this, every relationship has these boundaries. They're unspoken. And that's a problem, essentially, because they're not spoken. People have difficulty. Like, what will essentially happen, since they're unspoken and they're unwritten, then people will cross them and hurt each other, and sometimes unintentionally. So, for example, with social media, sometimes people will start like an old, not like they're not having sex with somebody, but maybe it's like an old person from high school. You know, you mentioned I'm from Pattonville. Well, guess how many Pattonville people are on my Facebook page, right? Like, so people might send a little message like saying, hey, how you doing? And initially, usually it's just a friendship thing. But like you said, sometimes you're seeking a little validation and somebody's giving you a little attention. And it's just this really easy space to start something, and nobody starts just fucking each other essentially. Like it's usually something worked into. It usually starts with a type of commiseration where they're just friends and they're talking and they're sharing what they're struggling with, and everybody struggles in their marriage, so it's not hard to find another person who's struggling in their marriage, right. And so if two of you start talking and just like sharing your emotional struggles, that could be the start of the emotional affair. Like instead of saying to your husband or your wife or your partner, hey, I'm struggling with these things. These are things that are hurting my feelings. They're instead starting to talk about that stuff with another person. And there's different reasons why they do that. Maybe they don't feel like their partner is willing to hear, or maybe they feel like they have talked about it until they were blue in their face and it doesn't change anything, right? But then when they talk with this other person, suddenly they can share things that they couldn't with their partner before. And so, to be honest, most of them do start in a type of emotional way. Some of them do turn into sexual stuff. Some of them stay on the emotional side, but when the partner finds out about it, it still hurts them like really bad when it happens. But it's such a high rate at 60 to 80%. Like, and the social media makes it a little bit easier for people to do it because they can do it through Snapchat or Instagram. And, you know, like even me, I've started to like really pay attention to like when people are contacting me on different social media forums, like what's the intent behind this essentially? Because or if somebody's texting me or calling me, usually that's a client. And it doesn't mean that people can't message me. Don't get me wrong. We actually met through Messenger, so no bad thoughts on that, right? But when somebody does reach out on Messenger, why Messenger? Why are they contacting there and not on a text? Well, it's like, well, think of like, and people don't think about this, but I do because I'm a therapist. I'm constantly thinking about all the ways people are crossing each other's boundaries. But it's because it's a little bit secretive. It's because you have to take a second or a third step to really find it. It's because you can actually keep it from your partner. And that's another part of the definition of an emotional or a physical affair, is that it's something you're keeping from your partner. Like, even that can be the thing that's like breaking someone's back essentially, or the straw that breaks somebody's back, because it's like, well, why did you feel the need to keep this secret? If you feel the need to keep something secret in your relationship, that's kind of a first sign that there's something a little shady about that. Well, not always. Yeah. I'm really a real stickler about intentions, because I don't think most people want for good. Like, even when you do start talking to another person on Messenger like that, they're not intending to hurt their partner. They might just be, like you said, wanting a little validation, feeling down.
Right, but wanting good for yourself when you know that it's going to hurt somebody else in the long run. That, to me, that's bad intentions.
I understand what you mean by that.
Does that make sense?
It does, and I still sometimes don't think people are doing it with that bad intention. I think sometimes they're just starting a conversation because it feels good, and some of them don't even think about what impact it would have on their partner, because they've never done it, or they've never had that conversation with their partner about, oh yeah, this would hurt my feelings. It's weird, because what'll happen is they'll be in here after it all comes out, and when you ask the question like, why would you have done that, or how could you have done that, they're often very confused. Like, how could I have done this? Like, a lot of them haven't thought of the impact that it would have had. Like, didn't even think twice. They just had the conversation, and it felt good, and it was a little escape, and then it went too far. And I mean, that's a really common story for it.
Right. So what percentage of the problems would you say are caused by social media in the cases that you see? Well,
I couldn't give you that number. I'd have to look up a stat for that, but some of them are, but some of them aren't. Some people are meeting each other at work. Some people travel a lot, and so they meet somebody out in the world. I will say, to your bad intentions, though, it is different when you intentionally put yourself on a dating site.
Yeah, that's a little crossing the bar.
I mean, like, there's an intent behind that I could see, like, so you didn't think you'd end up fucking somebody else?
Right. When you were just swiping and swiping and swiping.
You were just hoping that would work out. No. Like, that's an intentional stepping out, I would say. But as far as percentages, it would be really hard to tease that out. You know, like, some of them start there. Some of them start with somebody they meet in public through work. Or honestly, even in a social activity, it could be a friend. You know, like I've had ones where they were all in a couple friend group, and just one connected really well to another, and they just started talking to each other during a time when each of their marriages were either in a rough spot or This is the thing. So it's not always a rough spot. Sometimes they're bored. Like, you're not always unhappy in your marriage. Sometimes you're just bored or restless.
And you just need something new.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's bicycle riding or attention from somebody else, you just need something new for your life, and you can't figure out what it is.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's not always it's not always people being in like some horrible place. Some people were like, we were good. I don't that's actually the hardest one, because if there's something bad in the relationship, you can at least point to that and be like, okay, this is the bad thing that was happening. This is what we need to work on, right? But if there isn't, then there's this long like teasing out of like, what did I did wrong? Is there anything we could have done right? We even were having sex. We were having good sex. What's happening there? And sometimes it's boredom. It is just, I was bored. I was restless. I'm kind of in a place where I don't know what I want in life. It could be bad boundaries. Like when somebody did reach out, they were kind of excited, and instead of shutting that down, they just went with it. But it's not always I'm escaping some terrible marriage here.
So what do you feel about polygamy versus monogamy? As somebody in sex therapy, I would imagine you've ran through a number of different things.
Yeah.
Is polygamy a big thing that you run across?
Well, so not polygamy, but we call it polyamory. Polygamy is more of that religious, like Mormon style, where they're, they have like 5 or 6 wives. That's common in Utah, I think, but actually it's not that common in the Mormon religion. For polyamory, our term that we use actually the most is consensual non-monogamy, because it's a big umbrella term for anybody in that. So whether it's a polyamorous person, a swinger, somebody with an open relationship, somebody who's just got flirty friends.
What's the difference between an open relationship and polyamory?
Well, so I mean, that you're asking some tough questions, but I'll do my best to answer them. But like, it depends on how they define themselves. So polyamory tends to be more relationship and love based. So it's people who believe they can love more than one person. And so it's not just about the sex. It's about like having multiple long-term relationships that can be defined in different ways. Whereas open relationship could be just casual encounters. It could be come and go. Like when you are on, like for people who travel, for example, it could be as long as we're away from each other, we can do whatever we want, but like protect each other from STDs and pregnancies or unwanted pregnancies, right? So open, the difference with the open is that that one can be very widely defined. That one is very individual. And then swingers, for example, they have a tendency to approach things as like those who play together stay together. Some of them will do friends with benefits type deals, but a lot of times theirs is more of a casual sex. And I make this joke, and of course, when I make these definitions, for those of you who listen and like nitpick everything, like know that everybody could be a little bit different in terms of how they define themselves. But one joke I make about the swingers is they almost use people as like real live sex dolls or sex toys, essentially. It's like it would be similar to adding a sex toy in your relationship, only it's a person. And that's a bit of how they do it as swingers. It's a little less about the long-term relationship and more about the sexual piece. But then again, everybody could be different even in that community too. So I don't want to pigeonhole anybody who's like, I'm a swinger and that's not how I am. I'm like, it's fine. It's okay.
Right. To each their own. There's always outliers. We understand.
You're allowed to define in whatever way, shape, or form you feel comfortable with. But that's a little bit of some of the differences. So polyamorous people are trying to like cultivate long-term relationships with people. And some of them will just be friendships. Some of them will be like a throuple, for example, 3 people instead of a couple that are like living together. Some of them are communal based, like communes, like they will like hippie commune style, where it's like, let's all have like a farm and live together. And
have you ever been to one?
I haven't been to one of those, but I have been to some of the resorts where you can meet people like that. Like I went to, what was it? In Mexico, there's this place called Temptation, and it was a topless resort. But it was also like a place where people who were pretty open, were going. So I got to meet a lot of people in that community, and I'd totally be open to go to more of those because it was actually a really fun experience.
Were you a patron or were you speaking?
I was a patron. No, I went for my own fun. I went topless because I was like, I want to have this experience. And actually, it was a very freeing, wonderful experience. When you're around a bunch of naked boobs, by the way, just for your awareness.
Probably going to be a good time, huh?
Well, I was worried that I would feel insecure, like, because, as females, we're very judgy of each other at times. Not all of us,
Competitive.
but we can be. But it was interesting. I felt the opposite because everybody was really open and loving and non-judgmental. And also seeing a lot of boobs like that, I was like, oh, kind of boobs look pretty similar. Like they might have different shapes or drops, or like some are more teardrops, some are more bulky, but like really
just character.
Some, yeah, it's some are smaller, some are bigger, but like they all kind of looked very similar. It reminded me of actually, I don't know if you ever watched some of those National Geographics with like, a bunch of the African women that were just topless, but like when there's a bunch of them, really it just kind of looks like a normal part of the body, and it's weird, but it had the opposite of being very sexualized to me. It was more like, oh, we're all normal and we're all beautiful. That's special.
Right. Well, it's kind of like the, hey, don't push that button, right? It's the taboo of the boobs being covered all the time. Well, they're all out, so it's normal there.
Exactly. Yeah, I think every woman should, and every man should have the opportunity to go to a place like this. One thing that was really special about going to that hotel actually is they sat us down and had a consent conversation with us before we were even allowed on the premises.
Wow, in Mexico. I'm surprised about that.
Because it's a resort where people are kind of free, right? And so no, they sat us down and they said, if you want the lady, I wonder how many times she said the word tits, because she goes, if you want to touch your wife's tits, you touch your wife's tits. That's okay. We're not going to judge you. And I just was like, oh my God, I love you so much. But like, I wonder how many times she says tits. But like, she was like, but if somebody says no, you listen. That no means no. And, and you make sure you ask, like you don't get to just touch somebody else's tits, and it's like, oh, okay. Like you can look, because obviously everybody's like topless, but you don't get to just you don't have permission, essentially. And it was a really serious conversation. And they said, we will kick you off of our resort if you don't follow that, if anybody complains about you, because they're wanting to protect their patrons. So it was actually one of the most safe spaces I think you could have been topless. Just throwing it out there, know?
Absolutely.
And I think as a result, people were really respectful of each other, and people would ostracize people who weren't being respectful. Like there was this guy at the time, he was some Scottish guy, and he was just drinking too much and like weirdly acting, and so nobody did anything to him. We just avoided him, and all talked about like we don't feel like comfortable with him, but he hadn't done any, like other than he was just getting too drunk and kind of too weird with people. So, but even then it was like, hey,
was he by himself or was he with?
I think he was by himself. Sometimes like creepers. So what can you do? But I don't know. It was a great experience. I met a lot of cool friends that I actually still talk to now.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long. I know you got a busy day ahead. So what do you got planned on the horizon?
Well,
any speaking engagements? Anything you'd like to plug?
I do actually. So the Illinois Marriage and Family Therapy Conference, I'm the keynote for them on April 4th, I believe it is. It's in Naperville. So for anybody who is a therapist and does the whole marriage and family therapy conferences, I'll be doing a whole day seminar, it's like a masterclass on infidelity and how to treat it. So that's coming up. And I also have my podcast, www.aboutsexpodcast.com, and also a YouTube channel. I do a bunch of YouTube videos. Look up Angela Skurtu on YouTube, and I do series on different skills, like I have an infidelity series, but I also do skills on like sex and opening up your relationship and, trying new things, that sort of thing. So I'm just trying to give a lot of free information too.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to get tickets to see you speak as the keynote, do you know where they'd get them?
They would go to the Illinois Marriage and Family Therapy website, and then their annual conference, they purchase it there. I don't know what their website is, but it's IAMFT or something.
I'll get it from you and put it in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Sounds great.
Awesome, Angela. I really appreciate you taking the time out with me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to interview me.
Awesome.